She stared at the small slip of paper on the table, and the number printed across it mocked her $5. It was all the world seemed to think. Her husband's life was worth. The children clung to her, one on each side, their little hands clutching at her worn sweater, as if they knew that everything around them was breaking. She wanted to cry, but the tears had already dried up during the funeral. She wanted to scream, but the silence of the house pressed too hard against her chest. The clock on the wall ticked, and every sound seemed louder. In that hollow kitchen, the refrigerator hummed weakly. The wind rattled the cracked window pane, and her own breath was uneven, shallow, pulled in through trembling lips. She told herself not to faint, not to collapse, because the children were watching. Their mother had to be strong, or at least look like it. But the $5 on the table kept pulling her eyes back like a cruel magnet. She had gone to the lawyer's office hoping for something, anything, a little relief, after weeks of mourning, bills stacking higher, and neighbors whispering pity behind closed doors. Instead, he had handed her an envelope and a hollow apology, saying that was all there was left. The estate, the assets, everything had vanished under debts she had never known existed, and now her children's future was supposed to rest on that pitiful slip of paper. The boy tugged at her sleeve, asking if they could have dinner, and she smiled with lips that cracked under the effort. "Yes, baby," soon she said, though she had no answer for how there was little bread left, no milk. The pantry shelves were nearly bare. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against the wooden table, breathing in the smell of dust and old varnish, when suddenly the low hum outside made her lift her head. Headlights cut across the thin curtains, a car rolling into the driveway, not the old rusted ones that coughed smoke down their street, but a sleek, black car, polished and deliberate. She froze, her heart beating too fast. Who would come here now? Who would even know what to say to her? She rose slowly, the children clutching tighter, one peering through the fabric at the window. The doorbell rang sharp in the silence. It rang once, then again, and her hand shook as she reached for the knob. The moment stretched long. She thought of all the threats, the letters from collectors, the strangers who had called about debts that were not hers. What if it was another demand, another cruelty? But when the door opened, she found a man in a dark suit, standing tall under the porch light, his face unreadable, yet calm, his eyes fixed on hers, not with pity, but with something else, intent. In one hand, he carried a leather briefcase polished enough to catch the glow of the lamp. He adjusted his tie, then spoke softly. "Mrs. Carter, my name is Mr. Hensley. I believe we need to talk." Her voice caught in her throat. "Talk about what?" she asked, almost whispering, but he did not answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the children, peeking behind her, then back at her face with a measured seriousness. "May I come in?" he asked. Everything in her screamed. No, strangers were not to be trusted. Men in suits meant more trouble, yet something about his tone carried weight, not threat, but inevitability. She stepped aside, her bare feet cold on the floorboards as he entered. The children followed close to her skirts, eyes wide, watching every move. He set the briefcase on the table where the $5 check still lay. His gaze flicked toward it, and a small crease formed between his brows. Then he snapped the case open, the metal click echoing across the room, papers stacked neatly inside. He pulled one out, slid it across to her, his hand steady, even as hers shook when she reached for it. "This is not the end of your husband's estate," he said firmly. "This is only what they wanted you to believe." She looked down, words swimming across the page, her lips moving but no sound coming out as she tried to make sense of them. Behind her, the twins pressed their faces against her back, their whispers frightened. "What is it, Mama?" Her chest tightened, a different kind of breath. Now, not despair, but confusion, maybe even hope, though hope hurt worse because it could vanish in a moment. She forced her eyes to focus on the letter on the heading, embossed in deep ink, that spoke of ownership deeds, hidden accounts, and something larger than she could comprehend. Her husband had left something behind, something no one had told her about, something that might explain the shadows in his final weeks. The unanswered phone calls, the sudden trips she thought were about work. Perhaps they were about secrets. Perhaps he had hidden it for her, or perhaps he had hidden it from her. The lawyer's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he could read the questions spinning through her mind. "I cannot tell you everything now," he said, "but I can tell you this. What you were given today was not the truth. Your husband's real inheritance is elsewhere, waiting for you to claim it, and if you do not act soon, it may be lost forever." She felt her legs weaken and gripped the table to steady herself. The $5 check slid to the floor, unnoticed. The children clung tighter, whispering her name. "Mama, Mama, what does he mean?" But she had no answer. Not yet, only the sudden pounding of her heart. The fear that maybe this was another cruel trick, and the flicker of something more dangerous than grief, something like hope. And then his final words cut through the silence. "You have to be ready. Tomorrow morning I will take you there." Her breath caught again. Tomorrow, she asked where, but he only closed the briefcase with another sharp click, leaving the question hanging heavy in the air. Kitchen seemed to shrink around them, the children's eyes wide, her hands trembling. The papers on the table glowing faintly under the single bulb above, and the sense that whatever her husband had hidden was about to change everything forever. And just like that, she knew nothing would ever be the same again. Morning came with the sound of the street waking up, and the way the light slid across the chipped linoleum like a quiet promise, and she dressed the twins with slow, careful hands, smoothing their small collars and tying their laces, while her mind kept running back to the words from the night before. "That was not the truth. Your husband's real inheritance is elsewhere." And she kept asking herself, what if this is a trap? And also, what if this is the one door we cannot afford to miss? She packed a small bag for the children, a bottle of water to sandwiches, a faded blanket because the air still held a bite, and she did not know how long they would be out. The twins stayed close, the boy gripping the strap of her bag, the girl holding her wrist as if she could anchor them all with that small warm hand. When the black car pulled up again, its paint catching the cold light, she felt her heart push against her ribs, but she opened the door because not opening it would mean staying stuck in the life that $5 had written for them. The man in the dark suit stood there again, his tie knotted just so, and his eyes steady. He did not try to push past her, and he did not offer pity. He simply asked if she was ready, and she nodded, though her legs felt unsteady. He glanced at the twins and crouched for a moment, telling them he would try to make today quick and not scary, and the girl asked if there would be snacks, and he said he would try, and that tiny exchange softened the edge of her fear just enough for her to step forward and pull the door closed behind them. The car smelled faintly of leather and winter, and on the ride he did not make small talk. He placed a folder on his lap and watched the streets change from cracked sidewalks to quiet houses, to a highway lined with a thin stand of trees. He said they were going to a place that used to be a warehouse district down by the river, a place no one would think to look. He said her husband had set this up months before the accident, and that the details were not in any public record. He said whoever arranged that $5 check had expected her to stop asking questions, and he was here to make sure she did not. She tried to ask why her husband had kept this secret, and why no one from the family had told her anything, and he answered in a way that did not comfort but felt true. He said sometimes the safest place is the one that looks empty, and sometimes the people you think will guard your home are the same people who will open the door for a thief. He said her husband had been careful and afraid, and that fear might have saved what remained for the twins. They left the main road, and the car followed a narrow lane lined with chain-link fences on one side and old brick buildings on the other. The air tasted like metal and rain, and the river moved slow and quiet behind the warehouses. They stopped in front of a row of storage units painted a dull blue, the kind of place people forgot about. As soon as they passed by, he took out a key and offered it to her, and the metal felt cold in her palm, as if it had been waiting in the dark for a very long time. He led them to a unit near the end of the row and pointed to the number printed above the lock. It matched a number written on the corner of the folder on his lap. She slid the key into the lock with shaking hands, and the twins stood close enough that their shoulders touched hers. The door rolled up with a rough clatter and a breath of dust and old air, and inside there was only a single wooden trunk and a folding chair and a small lamp sitting on a crate, as if someone had set the room like a stage, and then walked away. He told her to take her time, and he stepped back to the open doorway to make a call, telling her he would be right there. If she needed anything, she moved toward the trunk. Each step slow. The wood was dark and smooth, and the brass latch was engraved with a small letter C. She traced it with her thumb and felt a rush of grief so sharp she had to close her eyes for a moment, because that letter was their name, and it was their life, and it was now a mystery too. She flipped the latch and lifted the lid, and there was a leather portfolio tied with cord, a stack of folders sealed with red string, and a single envelope with her name written in her husband's hand. And seeing that handwriting made her breath break, because it was him alive on the page. It was him telling her he had thought about her even after the world tried to erase him. She sat on the folding chair and slid a finger under the flap. The twins leaned against her knees, watching as if the paper itself could speak. The letter was not long, but it was heavy. He wrote that he was sorry for the fear and for the silence. He wrote that things had gone wrong in his business, and that someone he trusted had turned on him. He wrote that he had moved the last untangled pieces of their life here in a trust owned by their children. He wrote that if anyone tried to tell her there was nothing left, she was not to believe it. He wrote that a man would come to help her, and that this man would know a certain phrase, and if he did not say it, she should wait and call the number at the bottom of the second page. Her fingers trembled. She turned the page and saw a smaller line written sideways near the edge. It said the phrase is about the old bridge and the night we got stuck in the rain. She stared at those words because the bridge was something only they knew. The twins had been at home with a sitter that night, and she and her husband had been in his aging pickup, the road flooded and the bridge shuddering, and they had laughed through their panic singing. To keep the fear away, she read on and found directions to a bank and the name of a clerk and the note that the trunk had a false bottom and that the code was the twins' birthdays pressed together without spaces behind her. A gull called over the river and a barge horn moved somewhere far and slow. She felt both tiny and very alive. She whispered the twins' birthdays like a prayer, pressed the numbers into the hidden panel, and the board slid with a quiet click, revealing a narrow compartment with a small black pouch, a second envelope, and a metal key stamped with the number of a safe deposit box. The second envelope had a single line on the front in the same steady hand, and it said, "Open only when you are alone." She looked toward the doorway. The man in the suit was still talking on the phone, one hand on the doorframe, his profile in the light, his voice low, and even she slipped the second envelope and the key into her bag and kept first letter in her lap. She could feel her life taking a sharp turn, the way a car feels when a new road opens from the trees. The twins asked what it said, and she told them that their father had left them a puzzle, and that they were going to be brave and careful, and that she loved them. More than anything, the boy asked if the puzzle had treasure at the end, and she said it had something better, a chance to breathe again. When the call ended, the man stepped inside and asked if she had found what she needed for the first time. She really looked at him, not just his suit and his calm face, but the way his eyes moved when he asked questions. The way he did not look at the trunk, the way his breath stayed, even as if he already knew what was inside. She asked a simple question, a question that sounded small. "Can you tell me the phrase?" He blinked just once, and then he said the line he had delivered the night before, "This is not the end of your husband's estate." And she felt the tiniest alarm ring, because that was not a phrase, it was a statement, and the letter had been clear. She kept her face soft, the way you do when you need the person across from you to think you are still uncertain, and she folded the letter and placed it back into the portfolio. She thanked him for bringing her and asked what they were supposed to do next. He said the next stop was a bank not far from here, and that he had already spoken with a senior officer who would meet them. He said time mattered because if the people who took the assets learned she was moving, then they might try to freeze or seize what was left. He said they would stop for food for the twins on the way, and that she did not need to worry about the cost today. They drove across the bridge into the older part of the city, the sky heavy with a low grey lid, and the air filling with the smell of wet stone. He spoke into a small earpiece every few minutes, giving short answers to questions she could not hear, and each time he ended a call she noticed the same habit, the brief tightening of his jaw, the glance in the mirror, not at the twins but at the cars behind them, and she could not tell if that meant he was careful or hiding something, or both. At the bank, a quiet building with columns and a revolving door, he guided them inside with a practiced ease. The security guard nodded at him as if they had met before, and that made her feel safer. For a moment they were led into a small office with a glass wall. A woman with silver hair and a calm voice greeted them by name and offered the twins juice boxes and crayons. The woman asked for identification and signatures, and the man in the suit presented documents already prepared. The woman did not look surprised, and that too made the moment feel both reassuring and strange. When the clerk left to fetch the box, the man leaned closer and lowered his voice. The contents should include documents to transfer the trust into full control, he said, and there might be a deed and a line of credit to keep the children stable while the estate is sorted. He paused, then added, there might also be personal letters, and you can open those later in privacy. He looked at the twins as he said privacy, as if to assure her that he understood the line between business and grief, and that gesture almost quieted the small ringing alarm in her chest. They carried the steel box into a private viewing room and set it on the table. The clerk left and closed the door, and the sound of the latch was soft but final. He gestured for her to open it, and she slid the lid back and saw stacks of envelopes bound with rubber bands, a blue velvet pouch, and a thin ledger with her husband's handwriting along the edge. Her breath caught. She lifted the ledger first, and on the first page, she saw a drawing of a bridge, quick lines in pencil, and 2 words underneath. Hold fast. She felt the ground tilt with memory and meaning. The letter had said the true helper would know a phrase about the bridge, and here was the bridge again calling her to pay attention. She turned the next page and found a sheet of paper, folded around a small card. On the card was a number and a name, Anna Morales, and beneath that, a line written by her husband that said she will use the words the bridge holds when she answers, if she does not hang up and call the payphone number. On the last page her fingers shook. She looked up. He was watching her with a stillness that had no warmth. She closed the ledger and set it aside, and chose an envelope at random to buy herself a heartbeat. Inside was a photocopy of a deed and the name of a property she had never heard of, with the words held in trust for the minor children of Anne. She felt that lift of breath again, the one that tasted like maybe the twins, colored quietly, the boy drawing a square house with a river, and the girl drawing a large key with wings. The man checked his watch and said they should move to the next step, and she said softly, "I need to use the restroom," and he nodded and stepped back toward the door, telling her he would get the clerk to bring water, and she walked out into the corridor with the ledger pressed to her chest and her bag heavy at her side, and instead of going to the restroom she slipped into the small alcove with a payphone that looked like it had not rung in years, but still had a dial tone when she lifted it. She pulled the card with the number and dialed each digit slow, her mouth dry, her heart loud. Someone answered on the second ring, a woman with a steady voice and a hint of music in the way she said hello. And before she could speak, the woman said, "The bridge holds," and that was the phrase, and her knees almost gave out with relief. She said her name, and the woman said, "I am here because he asked me to be. I have been waiting for this call. Do not sign anything, not with anyone who came to you first, not with anyone who refuses to say the words we already shared." The corridor seemed to shrink and the phone grew heavy against her ear. She told the woman they were at the bank, and that the man who brought them had arranged everything. The woman asked if he had used the phrase, and she said no. And there was a quick, sharp breath through the line, and then the woman said, "Listen carefully. I am 3 blocks away. Do not let him see that, you know. Step out with your children and walk to the corner bakery with the blue awning. I will meet you there with identification and with the documents your husband left in my care, and together we will move the trust before they can touch either." Gaze slid back toward the door of the viewing room. The man in the suit was talking with the clerk, now both of them looking toward her and the twins. The little girl lifted her drawing and waved, and she forced a smile and waved back. The woman on the phone said one more thing. The husband said that if danger pressed close, there was an envelope at the very bottom of the box with red string and her name on it, and inside was a message that would tell you what to do in the first 5 minutes of fear. She hung up gently and returned to the room with slow, even steps, her face smooth as water inside. She crouched beside the twins and told them they had earned a treat and that they would go get warm sweet bread in a minute. She asked the man for a moment to look through one last envelope for a family memory, and before he could object, she reached to the bottom of the box and found the packet bound in red string, her name written across it. She untied it with shaking hands and slid out a single page, and what she saw made the air thin and her hands turn cold, because the message said in careful block letters, "Do not trust the man who brings you here," and under it a second line said, "He is not who he claims, and if you follow him, you will sign away the children's future." She felt his presence at her shoulder, the quiet closeness of someone who has learned to move without noise, and his voice came gentle, asking if everything was all right. And she folded the page and slipped it under the ledger, as if it were nothing at all. She looked up to meet his eyes, and found only reflection there, no grief, no heat, just a polished calm. She smiled the way you smile when a storm stands outside your door and you pretend it is only rain, and she said, "The twins are hungry now. Can we step out for a quick bite before we sign?" He hesitated a breath. His gaze flicked to the clerk, then to the camera in the corner, and back to her, and she recognized the calculation there. It was the look of a person counting risks. He said, "Of course there is a bakery just at the corner," and he lifted the box with one hand and his briefcase with the other, and said, "We will take this with us to keep things moving." And she nodded, though the message in her sleeve felt like a burning coal she gathered. The twins took each small hand and walked toward the revolving door with a voice in her head. repeating, "The bridge holds, the bridge holds, the bridge holds." The street air was cold and alive, and the blue awning of the bakery snapped lightly in the wind. The scent of sugar and coffee drifted toward them, and the twins tugged at her hands, eager and unaware, and she kept her face calm while the man carried the box behind them, his steps smooth and silent. And just as they reached the door of the bakery, a second black car slid to the curb, and a woman stepped out with a folder tucked under her arm and a steady gaze fixed on the family. And the man in the suit stopped mid-step, and in that pause she understood that one of them was about to ask her to choose, and that the wrong choice. The woman who stepped out of the second black car moved with a calm certainty, her heels striking the pavement, in rhythm with the beating of the widow's heart, and the man beside her froze for the first time, his jaw tight, his grip on the briefcase shifting, as if the weight of it had suddenly changed. The twins clung to their mother's hands, their small fingers digging into her skin, and she knew the moment had split open like a fault line, one side leading into shadow, the other toward a truth she was not yet ready to face. The woman stopped only a few feet away, her dark coat billowing slightly in the breeze, and when she spoke, her voice carried both strength and a strange gentleness. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "my name is Anna Morales, and your husband entrusted me with the truth." She reached into her coat, slowly, deliberately pulling out a folder with the same letter C engraved at the corner, the same C her husband had carved into the trunk, and the woman's eyes softened as she glanced at the twins. "I am here because you wanted me to protect them." The man in the suit took one step forward, his words clipped and sharp. "This is unnecessary," he told her. "Everything is already under control, and she should not be confused by stores." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a sheaf of papers, thrusting them forward. "Sign these, and the assets can be released without further delay, Mrs. Carter. I assure you, this is legitimate. The bank is prepared to confirm everything." But the widow felt the letter inside her sleeve, the one written in her husband's hand, warning her not to trust the man who brought her, and her pulse thundered in her ears. She looked at Anna and asked the question her husband had written as a test, "What does the bridge hold?" And without hesitation, Anna answered, "It holds the night, it holds the rain, it holds us together." Her voice steady, her gaze unwavering, and the widow nearly collapsed from the wave of relief that broke inside her, because no one else could have known those words, no one but him. And now this woman. The man stiffened, realizing too late that he had been exposed, his face a mask of calm, but his knuckles whitening around the briefcase. He said, "Do not be deceived. She is trying to steal what is rightfully yours." But the twins pressed closer to their mother, and the boy whispered, "Mama, trust the lady." And she knew children could sense truths that adults tried to bury. She stepped forward, taking the folder from Anna, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside were bank documents, deeds, records of transfers, all tied to her husband's name, and all secured under the trust of her children. Anna said, "He knew they would come after you with lies. He knew they would dangle false papers. He knew you would need a way to tell who was real and who was not, and that is why he gave me this." And she reached into her bag and pulled out a smaller sealed envelope with the same familiar handwriting across it, addressed to his wife. Alone, her breath caught. She reached for it with both hands, and her knees wobbled as she read the words scrawled across the flap. "If you are holding this, then the wrong people have already found you, and the right one has finally arrived. Open this only in her presence." And she tore the flap with shaking fingers, pulling out the note, her husband's words racing across the page. He wrote that betrayal had come from inside his circle. A man he once trusted with everything had tried to strip him of his work and his wealth, and that man would not stop even after death. He wrote that Anna was the only one he had told the whole story to, and that she would guide his family through the storm. He wrote that if she was reading this, it meant he had been taken before he could fix the damage himself, but he believed in her strength and in the fire of their children's future. He wrote that she must never sign a paper until Anna was there beside her. The man in the suit shifted his stance, his mask cracking just enough for her to see the fury beneath. He said, "You are making a mistake. Those children will starve while you chase ghosts." But his voice betrayed urgency now, and desperation, and she remembered the phrase in the warning letter, "Do not trust the man who brings you here." And she realized that if she hesitated, if she faltered, even for a breath, he might try to take what little was left. And moved closer, her voice low but steady. "We need to leave with the children now. The documents He carries our counterfeit, and once he has your signature, everything will vanish." She nodded, clutching the twins and moving toward the bakery door, but the man blocked the way, his frame tall, his eyes cold. "You will regret this choice," he hissed, and in that moment she felt fear surge, but also anger, a deeper, fiercer anger than she had allowed herself since the day of the funeral. She lifted her chin, her voice breaking but strong enough. "We already regret enough. We will not regret trusting the truth." And Anna stepped between them, her hands slipping into her coat, and for a tense second the widow thought she might draw a weapon, but instead she pulled out her phone and dialed quickly, speaking into it with sharp clarity. "This is Morales. Extraction confirmed, location corner of 5th and River. Send the team." Now the man's expression shifted again, calculation flashing in his eyes. He glanced at the twins, then at the street, as if weighing whether he could grab the briefcase and run before anyone arrived. But the sound of approaching engines decided it. Black SUVs rolled up, and men and women in dark jackets stepped out. Moving with precision, the man cursed under his breath, then turned and walked swiftly to his own car. His briefcase still clutched tight. He slipped inside, and the tires screeched as he pulled away, vanishing into the traffic. The widow sagged against the bakery wall, tears she had not allowed in weeks sliding down her face. The twins clung to her, and Anna placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We have little time," she said. "He will try again, but now you know the truth. Now we move to secure it before he can touch it again." They were guided into one of the SUVs. The windows tinted the interior warm and quiet. Anna sat beside her, explaining in low tones that her husband had discovered a network siphoning money from his company, and when he confronted them, they had turned ruthless. She explained that he had quietly pulled what he could and secured it under a hidden trust for the children, but in doing so, he had made powerful enemies who needed her to believe the lie of poverty so they could claim what was left unchallenged. The widow listened, her grip on the twins tight, her heart aching with every word but also filling with a fire she had thought long dead. She asked why her husband had never told her, and Anna looked at her with eyes that carried both sympathy and steel. "Sometimes silence is not betrayal," she said. "Sometimes it is protection. He thought if you knew the weight of it, you would be in danger too, but he always meant for you to find this thought." Convoy drove them to a safe house on the edge of the city, a modest 2-story home with a garden and a locked gate inside. It smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, and Anna guided them to a living room, where papers and files were spread across a long oak table. "Here," she said, "we begin the real work." The twins sat on the couch. Anna made them cocoa, and the widow sat at the table, her hands hovering over the papers, each one a piece of the puzzle. Deeds showing land she had never seen, accounts opened under layers of trust, names of companies that seemed ordinary, but all tied back to her husband. She asked, "How much is all this worth?" And Anna gave a small shake of her head. "It is not only about worth, it is about proof. Proof that he was not reckless. Proof that his life was stolen and his death was not an accident." The words froze her blood. "Not an accident," she whispered. Anna nodded. "His car crash was staged. They had wanted it to look final, to silence him before he could reveal what he had uncovered." The widow gripped the table to steady herself, her vision swimming, and the twins looked up, wide-eyed at her sudden stillness. Anna's voice softened. "I know this is heavy. I know it feels like grief has opened a second wound, but you must understand, his enemies will not stop until every piece is destroyed. Unless we act now, you and the children are the only ones who can finish what he began." The widow breathed through the pain, her chest rising and falling like a tide. She looked at the twins, their small faces watching her with complete trust, and she felt something settle inside her, a weight shifting into resolve. She said, "Tell me what I have to do," and Anna leaned forward, sliding the first stack of papers toward her. "It begins with this," she said. Night fell over the city, the safe house, quiet but charged with energy. Anna outlined the steps ahead. Tomorrow, they would move to transfer the deeds and accounts into her direct guardianship. Tomorrow they would close the false channels the enemies had opened. Tomorrow the fight would begin in earnest, but for tonight she was to rest, gather strength, hold her children close, and remember that her husband had believed in her enough to leave the final key in her hands. She lay in the guest room, the twins asleep on either side of her, their breaths soft and steady, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as the words repeated through her mind, "Not an accident." And in the dark she swore that if it was true, if they had taken him from her, then she would not stop until every truth was dragged into the light. And as she closed her eyes, she felt the faintest echo of his voice, the memory of him on that bridge in the rain, telling her to hold fast, and she knew that part 3 of her journey was not just survival, it was war. The morning light spilled through thin curtains and painted the safe house in pale gold, yet there was nothing calm in the air. The widow awoke with the twins pressed against her, their warmth a reminder of why she had to keep going. She rose quietly, kissed their foreheads, and walked to the kitchen where Anna already sat, her dark hair tied back, a map and folders spread across the table, a pot of coffee steaming. Between them, Anna looked up, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Today is the day," she said. "We take the first steps toward securing everything your husband left behind and exposing those who tried to erase it." The widow nodded, though her stomach twisted. With nerves, she had never been a fighter, never been a strategist, but grief had carved her into something else, something harder. They sat together as Anna explained the plan. The first move was to secure the deeds, the ones that gave her children legal claim over properties her husband had hidden under layers of false ownership. These deeds would be filed with the court, but they would need witnesses, signatures, and official seals that could not be forged. The second move was to lock down the accounts, transferring them to guardianship until the twins came of age. And the third move, perhaps the most dangerous, would be to confront the man in the suit who had tried to trick her, because Anna had discovered his name, and it was not Hensley as he had claimed. His real name was Cole Mercer, a fixer for the very syndicate that had turned her husband's life into a She's a widow listened, her hands gripping the edges of the table until her knuckles whitened. Anna placed one warm hand over hers, steadying her. "You do not have to become a soldier," she said. "You only have to keep your courage for them." She nodded toward the twins who had wandered sleepily into the kitchen, rubbing their eyes. "You fight because you are their shield." They left the safe house in another car, this one older, less noticeable. Anna drove through quiet streets while the widow sat in the passenger seat, staring at the folder in her lap. The names of banks, companies, and properties like a map to a life she never knew she had. She felt anger rise again. Her husband had carried this alone while smiling at her across dinners, while tucking their children into bed, while dying in silence under the weight of betrayal. She whispered to herself. Never again. At the courthouse, Anna guided her through dim hallways past clerks and lawyers who barely glanced at them. They filed the first deed, the one tied to a small plot of land outside the city, and the stamp fell heavy and final across the paper. That moment felt like breathing for the first time in weeks, proof that something solid was theirs, that no lie could touch. The widow's throat tightened. She wanted to cry, but she held it in because there was more to do. At the bank, they sat with a senior officer, a woman with sharp glasses and careful words. Anna laid out the documents, cross-checking signatures with the ledger. Her husband had left. The officer frowned when she saw discrepancies between what Mercer had filed earlier and what the widow now carried. "These are fraudulent," she said flatly. "If you had signed them, your children would have lost everything." The widow's hands shook under the table, but she kept her voice steady. "He almost had me," she whispered. The officer looked at her with something like respect and stamped the correct forms. Hours passed, the twins coloring in the corner of each office, patient and quiet, their innocence a strange shield against the corruption surrounding them. When the last paper was signed and sealed, Anna leaned back, exhaling. "This is progress," she said, "but the enemy will know by now. They will not stop. They will try to corner you again." The widow looked at her reflection in the bank's glass wall and hardly recognized the woman staring back. The sorrow was still there, but beneath it was something sharper, like steel drawn from fire. She asked, "What comes next?" And Anna's eyes softened, then hardened again. "We prepare for him to come back." That night at the safe house, the children finally asleep, Anna spread a new set of papers on the table, photographs, surveillance reports, names circled in red. Mercer had been tracking her from the start, not just to steal but to silence her. The syndicate wanted every trace of her husband's truth buried, and she was now the last loose thread. She asked Anna, "Why help me? Why risk this?" And Anna's voice carried both sorrow and conviction. "Because your husband saved me once, long ago, and when he asked me to watch over his family, I gave him my word." The widow touched the folder, feeling the weight of her husband's trust, and for the first time she realized she was not alone, not completely. She leaned back, whispered "Thank you," and Anna nodded silently. The next day, the storm arrived. Mercer did not knock. This time he came, with two men, heavy-built, sharp eyes, waiting by the curb. As he walked up the path, the widow saw them through the curtain, her pulse racing. She turned to Anna, who already had her phone in her hand, ready to call in allies, but Anna shook her head slowly. "Not yet. If we run now, we lose the chance to end this." The knock was deliberate, loud, merciless. She opened the door with the chain still latched. Mercer's face was calm, but his eyes burned. He said, "You made a mistake walking away yesterday. Those papers you filed will not save you. The people I work for do not forgive, and they do not forget. Hand me what you took, and maybe your children will grow up without knowing what fear really feels." Like her knees shook, but she kept her gaze steady, and her voice low and clear. "You will not take another thing from us." Mercer leaned closer through the gap in the door, his breath cold, his smile sharp. "Do you think Anna can protect you? She has her own debts to pay. You have no idea who you are standing against behind her." Anna's voice rang out firm and unwavering. "She is standing against a liar who failed twice." Already Mercer's eyes flicked toward her, then back at the widow, and for the first time she saw something crack beneath his mask. Frustration, anger, desperation. He hissed, "You think this is over? It is only beginning." He turned sharply and walked down the steps, his men following. The car door slammed, the engine roared, and they drove away, leaving only silence and the widow's heart pounding. In her ears, Anna closed the door, bolted it, and said, "They will strike again, but now they know you will not break them." Widow slid down against the door, clutching her chest, tears spilling, not of weakness but of release. She whispered, "I will not let him win. I will not let them take my children's future." Anna knelt beside her, squeezing her shoulder, then said quietly, "Tomorrow we go deeper. Tomorrow we find the evidence. He died for it." In that moment, the widow understood that survival was no longer enough. The fight was no longer only about money or land or deeds. It was about truth. It was about exposing the betrayal that had stolen her husband's life, and if she was to honor his memory and protect her children, she would have to see this through to the end, no matter what it cost. That night, as the twins slept, she opened the envelope marked for her eyes, only the one she had carried since the storage unit. Inside was a single line written in his hand, "Find the ledger with the red ribbon. It holds the names." She felt her breath catch, because she realized the war ahead would not just be against Mercer, it would be against everyone on that list, and she was holding the spark that could burn their empire. Down the night stretched, long and restless, her thoughts circling the single line from her husband's hidden note, "Find the ledger with the red ribbon. It holds the names." She rose quietly, careful not to wake the twins, and spread the folders across the kitchen table. Anna joined her minutes later, already awake, as if she too had been waiting for the storm to deepen. Together they sifted through pages, deeds, receipts, accounts, until at last Anna pulled free a slim black ledger bound with frayed red ribbon. The widow's breath caught, her hands trembling as she untied the ribbon. Inside were names written in her husband's precise hand, names that meant nothing to her at first glance, until Anna leaned over, pointing with sharp certainty. Politicians, bankers, executives, people who controlled the flow of money and power in the city. Her husband had been tracing every thread, and this ledger was proof of the network siphoning his company and bleeding others dry. Her heart pounded as she realized this was bigger than just one family's inheritance. This was rot at the core of everything around the manor. S. voice was steady. "Your husband knew that if he tried to take them down alone, they would kill him. So he built this trail for you to find, but it was not just for money. It was to show the truth, to break their hold." She flipped through the pages, faster, each one layered with connections, each one a knot in a web too large to fathom. She whispered, "He carried this weight all alone, and it killed him." Anna shook her head softly. "Not killed, broken, but not alone anymore, because now you hold it and you are not carrying it alone." The widow looked at the twins sleeping on the couch, innocent faces framed in the dim light, and felt her chest ache, but also harden with resolve. She asked, "What do we do with this?" And Anna answered carefully, "We make copies, we protect the original, and then we choose the right moment to reveal it. But timing is everything. If we move too soon, they will bury us. If we wait too long, they will bury the evidence. They spent the dawn hours photographing each page, hiding the images in encrypted drives that Anna assured her were safe. They placed the original back under the red ribbon and locked it in a safe built into the floor of the safe house. Then Anna made calls, hushed and urgent, summoning allies she trusted. One of them, a journalist known for chasing corruption. Another, a retired judge with no debts to pay. Each of them sworn to protect the truth until it could not be silenced by midday. The widow felt the weight of exhaustion, but also the thrill of fire in her veins. For the first time since the funeral, she felt alive with purpose. The twins sensed the change, clinging less and smiling more, as if her determination had given them courage too. But that fragile calm shattered when Anna's phone rang, and her face hardened the moment she answered. Mercer was back, and he had filed motions in court challenging every deed, every account, claiming that she, the widow, was incompetent to handle them, and demanding guardianship be transferred to a proxy. The widow's stomach dropped. He was trying to strip her through the system, not with threats, not with lies, whispered in shadows, but with paper and law. Anna said, "This means we are getting close. He is desperate, and desperation makes him sloppy, but it also makes him dangerous." She gathered the twins, kissed their foreheads, and told them they were going to fight again, and that this time they would win at the courthouse. Mercer was waiting, flanked by his men, his smile sharp as a blade. He greeted her with mock courtesy, telling the judge she was overwhelmed, grieving, unfit to protect the estate. He held up forged papers claiming debts, unpaid, incompetence, proven unaccounted with the stamped deeds, the corrected bank files, the truth, piece by piece, the courtroom thick with tension. Each argument battled the widow's chest, tight with fear. But when the judge turned to her and asked if she believed she could carry this responsibility, she stood, her voice shaking but strong. "My husband trusted me with this, and I will not let anyone take it from our children." The judge studied her a long moment, then asked to see the original trust documents. Anna produced them, sealed in plastic and stamped. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing at Mercer, before declaring the challenge denied. Mercer's mask cracked for an instant, fury flashing in his eyes, but he bowed stiffly, muttering that this was far from over. Outside the courthouse, Anna leaned close, whispering, "You won today, but he will come harder now. He cannot afford to lose. You carry more than inheritance. You carry the weapon that can ruin them. He will not stop until he takes it, or until we take him." That night, the widow sat alone on the porch of the safe house, the cool air biting her skin, her mind replaying every moment, her husband's laugh, the way he had kissed the twins, "Good night," the look in his eyes when he thought she was not watching. She whispered into the dark, "I will finish what you started. I promise," and the wind stirred as if carrying his answer. When she returned inside, Anna was waiting with grim news. Mercer had placed someone close to the court, someone who leaked that the ledger existed, though not what it contained. Now the entire syndicate would be hunting, not just Mercer. The widow felt fear curl cold around her spine, but she clenched her fists tighter, saying, "Then we move before they do." The following day, Anna led her to a quiet meeting in a hotel room where the journalist waited, her eyes sharp, her recorder ready. The widow slid the ledger across the table, her voice steady as she said this, "Killed my husband, but it will not be buried with him." The journalist opened the ledger, her eyes widening page after page, and she whispered, "This will burn the city to its bones." But before they could move further, Anna's phone buzzed, a warning call. Mercer's men had tracked them down. The sound of tires screeched outside. The journalist shoved the ledger back into the widow's hands, saying, "Do not let them touch this, no matter what." Anna pulled her toward the back exit, the twins in her arms. The widow clutching the ledger tight as footsteps thundered in the hallway. They burst into the alley, the city pressing close around them. Mercer stepping from the shadows, his calm mask gone, replaced by a raw fury. He blocked their path, his men closing in. He said, "Give me the ledger, and I might let you walk away." The widow stood trembling, but she raised the ledger high, clutching it like a shield, and said, "No, this is my husband's voice, and you will not silence it." The alley froze for a heartbeat, Mercer's eyes narrowing as if he weighed whether to strike, but Anna's hand was already at her coat, and a siren wailed in the distance. Reinforcements closing in. He hissed curses before retreating into the night, leaving only his promise, "I will end you before you end me." The widow stood there, chest heaving, the twins clinging tighter than ever. Anna gripping her arm, saying, "You were braver than you know." And in that moment she realized bravery was not the absence of fear, but standing while fear tried to break her. She looked at the ledger, then at the city stretching beyond the alley, and she knew the final battle was coming, the choice between burying the truth and setting it free, no matter what it cost. That night she did not sleep. She sat by the twins, watching them breathe, listening to their soft murmurs, and holding the ledger close. She whispered again to her husband, "I will not fail you, I will not fail them." And in her chest she felt fire become resolve. Tomorrow she and Anna would make their move. Tomorrow the names in the ledger would no longer be hidden. Tomorrow Mercer would face the storm he had tried to bury, and she would be the one to unleash it. The city woke heavy with storm clouds, the sky swollen gray and Restless, the widow stood at the window of the safe house, the ledger pressed against her chest, her reflection faint in the glass. She thought of her husband, his smile, his laugh, the way he whispered, "Hold fast" in the rain, and she knew this was the day it would all come to an end, one way or another. Anna entered quietly, setting a steaming mug on the table, her voice steady though her eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. "We cannot wait any longer," she said. "Mercer will move today, and if we do not strike first, the ledger will vanish into the dark." She explained the plan. The journalist was ready to publish every page of the ledger online. The retired judge had arranged for sworn testimony the moment the documents were released, and Anna's allies in law enforcement had secured safe passage for the widow and the twins. But there was one final risk. They would have to deliver the original ledger to the courthouse to be sealed as official evidence. Otherwise, Mercer could argue it was fabricated. The widow nodded, fear running through her veins, but resolve stronger. She kissed the twins' foreheads, told them she loved them, and left them in the care of allies who promised to guard them with their lives. She stepped into the waiting car with Anna, the ledger in a steel case resting on her lap, her heart pounding with every turn of the wheels. Halfway to the courthouse, the attack came. A black SUV slammed into their side, spinning them toward the curb, metal screaming, glass shattering. Anna's hand shot out, grabbing the case. The widow's shoulder burned from the impact, but she refused to let go of the steel box. Doors flew open, men pouring out, weapons in their hands. Mercer stepping into the street, his smile cold and merciless. He called out, "You could have walked away with your children safe, but you chose war. Now give me the ledger." Anna shoved the widow toward the back door, shouting, "Run!" She stumbled into the street, clutching the case, the world spinning but her legs moving. Fueled by pure terror, Mercer's men closed in, but sirens wailed from the distant squad. Cars pulling round the corner. Anna's allies arriving. Gunfire cracked through the air. The widow ducked behind a wall, shielding the case with her body. Mercer cursed, barking orders, his men scattering as police advanced, but his eyes stayed locked on her, not with defeat but with promise. "This is not finished," he shouted, before vanishing into the chaos. Hands pulled her to safety. Anna, breathless but alive, the case still secured together. They ran into the courthouse, where guards closed the doors behind them, the judge waiting, pale but resolute. The widow placed the case on the bench, her hands trembling as she opened it, revealing the red-bound ledger. The judge examined it, then signed the seal across the envelope containing it, declaring it official evidence of record. In that instant, the weight shifted. The ledger was no longer just hers. It was truth carried into light. News spread fast, the journalist publishing images online, the story erupting across the city headlines, blazing names once untouchable, now dragged into fire, the syndicate scrambling to deny, but the proof undeniable, people demanding answers, voices rising against the corruption, Mercer's shadow network unraveling thread by thread. That night the widow returned to the safe house, the twins running into her arms, their laughter the sweetest sound she had heard in months. She held them close, whispering, "We are safe now, we are free." Anna watched from the doorway, a faint smile breaking through her tired eyes. "You did it," she said. "Not me," the widow answered as together and him she touched the necklace at her throat, where a tiny photo of her husband rested, his memory alive in every breath. Days later, the trial began, the ledger carried into the courtroom. Mercer, finally caught, dragged before the bench, his mask stripped, his lies crumbling under the weight of proof. The widow sat in the gallery, her twins beside her, Anna at her side, her heart still aching, but stronger. She listened as justice spoke, not only for her husband, but for every life the syndicate had poisoned. When the verdict fell guilty, the widow closed her eyes, tears sliding. Free not of grief this time, but of released. That evening she took the twins to the river, the old bridge still standing though worn with time. They sat on the edge, the wind cool and the water moving slow. She told them the story of the night she and their father had been trapped there in the storm, how he had laughed in fear, how he had whispered, "Hold fast," and she told them that those words would guide them all their lives, because sometimes life takes everything from you and leaves you with only two choices: break or hold fast. She chose to hold fast, and it had carried them. Here the twins leaned against her, the boy whispering, "Mama, we will be strong like you," the girl whispering, "We will make him proud." She kissed their foreheads, the ache in her chest easing, replaced with warmth. The fight had cost much, her husband gone, her innocence burned away, her nights scarred with fear, but she had gained something fierce and unshakable, a truth she had carried into light, a strength she never knew she had, and a lesson carved deep into her soul. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find who you really are. The last light of sunset spilled across the water. She whispered into the wind, "Thank you, love, for trusting me, for leaving me the path. I will carry it always." And the river answered in soft ripples against the shoulder. Story had ended, but her life had only just begun, and as she stood with her twins at her side, she knew they would walk forward together, not broken, but unbreakable. The end.